Hello, and welcome to Red Rock Relationships, a podcast about communication. Let's unpack the relationships that we encounter in our daily lives and learn about what makes them tick. And now your host for Red Rock Relationships, Dr. James B. Stein.
Well, it's me and it's us, and we're here. Let's do the thing. As you can see, it's just me this time. And the reason for that is because, at least for the foreseeable future, this is going to be the very last episode of Red Rock Relationships. So I started this show, episode 1, alone, and I felt like going out alone was the way to do it. In that first episode, I kind of just previewed what I hoped to achieve. And as I sit here 75 episodes later, I feel like I did a pretty good job. So I'll start by acknowledging a few things, and then we'll get to the actual content of what I want to talk about during my short time today. First things first, I got to give thank yous. There's so many to give. I tried to count, but lost count. We had at least 35, 40 guests on this show, a bunch of repeat guests, people who appeared so frequently that they may as well have been co-hosts. And so if you ever appeared on this show, I want to say thanks to you. I appreciate your time and your input and your expertise. And, you know, it would have been impossible for me to do a show like this with just myself. It would have been terribly, horribly, painfully boring. I know that at least a few of my colleagues have taken these episodes, shared them with their classes and students, and that's what it's really all about. I know I've shared it with my students, and you know, the few students who have stumbled upon it in other realms have remarked to me about how much they like it, how much they enjoy it. And in my opinion, the best part is that they're so based in research and theory that they'll age pretty well. We don't really talk about politics or pop culture or especially timely things. And as a result, it's just all theory. And then, of course, I have to thank my producer, Sean Denovan, who agreed to tackle this project with me 5 years ago. Sean, can you believe it's been 5 years?
Are we still in COVID?
That's when we started. We started during COVID. And yeah, again, 75 episodes. He never charged me a dime. It's technically a university-affiliated podcast, so I guess that's why. But the point is, I couldn't have done it without him. I mean, I guess I could have. I could have just set up a microphone in my living room, but it would not have been anywhere near as productive or well put together. It wouldn't have had the reach that it had. And so I appreciate your labor, Sean. Thank you for that. And maybe someday I'll come back as a guest on someone else's show or do some sort of event. Uh-oh. Did it happen again? No? We're good. Along the way, we did have a number of technical issues pop up from time to time. I thought maybe the system was going to give us one less goodbye, one final farewell of shutting down and restarting, but I think we're all right. So anyway, all that to say, thank you, Sean. Thank you to all my guests, and thanks to all the listeners. I want to get that out of the way now so that we're not, doing it at the end, scrambling to do it at the end. So let's get into it. What I want to do in this final installment is a few things. I want to do 3 main things. This was always a podcast about relationships, and, you know, the relationship research really is biased in a very heavy way toward men who date women and women who date men, heterosexual folks. And so I want to start by sort of acknowledging the complexities of close relationships, romantic relationships, and intimate relationships. And then I'll do my slightly heteronormative thing. I have some thoughts on women who date men. I have some thoughts on men who date women. And then I'll have some extended concluding thoughts, and that'll be it. That'll be the whole episode. So let's start. When it comes to the complexity of relationships, there's quite a bit to consider. I think the first thing that I really wanted to communicate with this podcast is that there's so many different types of relationships. There's so many different types of close relationships, interpersonal relationships, familial relationships, professional relationships, friendships, peer relationships. There's online relationships and in-person relationships and everything in between. And I think when we do relationships, people often mistakenly categorize their experience as existing within a set of norms that they've been predisposed to believe. And what I mean by that is we typically, when we hear the word romantic relationship or intimate relationship, there is a reaction that happens. We think of a very specific type of person or a very specific couple. You can probably close your eyes and do it right now. But I think it's really important to remember that relationships exist in the context that they are conceived of in. When we do a relationship, we have individual needs. We've talked about these needs painstakingly on this show. But of course, we've also talked about the variety of other needs and goals that we need met. For example, relational needs. When we are in a relationship with someone, it's no longer just about us. The other person has needs too, and the relationship has needs. So I can have all my needs met, my partner can have all of their needs met, and the relationship itself might still be struggling due to circumstantial factors or due to timeline factors or material factors or any variety of issues. And then, of course, at the more macro level, there are cultural issues. As somebody who is not from Southern Utah, I'm from New Jersey. I spent the bulk of my life in New Jersey, and then I spent a good few years living in the Phoenix area before moving into Washington County. I've been here for a little over 6 years now. And one thing that I've noticed existing in this community is that there are really unique cultural markers. Some are fascinating, some are interesting and exciting and inspiring, and others are concerning and upsetting. And of course, every culture, every town, every neighborhood has elements like that. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the unique cultural environment that we exist in here in Washington County, specifically St. George, more specifically at UT. In my time interacting with students, I've realized that students, young adults here in this area, simultaneously have an urge to explore the world and learn new things, and they crave knowledge and information about relationships. And at the same time, they have a lot of pressures to do relationships in very specific ways that they've been taught from childhood are the appropriate or the best way to do relationships. And I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to say, don't listen to what you've been told your whole life, throw it all in the garbage, and take a completely new stance on relationships. Instead, I think we should be balancing the needs that we have as individuals, right? I think we should be being true to ourselves. We should be balancing those needs with the needs that any given relationship has, familial, friendship, romantic, platonic, or otherwise. And I think we should also be balancing those needs with the needs of the community. Sometimes what the community needs is to be shaken up a little bit, to be introduced to new things, to new groups, to new peoples. And sometimes this comes through simply viewing, experiencing, seeing with your own eyes or being adjacent to relationships that you weren't aware were capable of existing because of the environment that you grew up in. Consider, for example, the amount of delicious food places that have popped up in town recently. We have a new Vietnamese sandwich shop. We have a delicious Korean place, now a hot pot place. There's a new Greek place that popped up recently. And of course, for several years running, there was my favorite Papa's Got Jerk, which is Caribbean food. I bring this up because a lot of people didn't know that they liked Korean food or Caribbean food or Vietnamese food or Greek food until they tried it because it was here. And I guarantee you a lot more people don't know that they like those things because they haven't tried it or refuse to try it. And the same can be said about relationships. Relationships are complex, just like a well-seasoned, dish, right? And so to that end, I think it's very important to acknowledge that relationships look different based on, for example, life chapter and priorities. Some people like to continue the ongoing dominant culture here in town, and I think that those folks are welcome to participate in relationships however they want to. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that some people have different priorities, are in different life stages, and have different beliefs, and they participate in relationships in different ways as well. All that to say, relationships are indeed complex. They're well-seasoned, like a well-seasoned meal. And if you want to sit there and have a turkey and mayonnaise sandwich, you're more than welcome to. I just would, I think it would be beneficial to go out and maybe try a Vietnamese sandwich or a Korean dish, some beef bulgogi every now and then. To that end, I want to transition into, I don't want to use the word advice because I'm not a therapist, but based on the literature, based on my anecdotal and lived experience here in St. George, I have some ideas. Ideas for women who date men and ideas for men who date women. So we'll start with the girlies. There are two big pieces of, again, I guess advice that I'd like to offer to women who date men. And I think that they run in tandem with each other, as well as this idea of like balancing things. Piece of advice number one. This is one of my favorite catchphrases. Just because somebody is near you or around you doesn't necessarily mean they're the right one. What I'm trying to say is there's a difference between Mr. Right and Mr. Right there. I think it's very important to experience the world. I think it's very important to experience other parts of this country. I think it's very important to experience other parts of this state before deciding exactly who it would be that you want to settle down with forever. I'll never forget the first semester that I got here. I was teaching two different classes. One was a class full of seniors, and one was a class full of freshmen. And a bunch of the freshmen introduced themselves, and they said that, they just turned 18, and they're getting married next month. And I was like, whoa, that's a quick marriage. And then the seniors, they'd say, well, I've been married for a few years, and I'm getting ready to have my first kid. Or they'd say, I just got divorced. And I was like, whoa, that's a really early time to have either of those two things happen. And I think this comes back to like the cultural expectations, specifically in this region. People are expected to settle down very early. Now, I could offer my thoughts on why I think that is, but it would be besides the point. I think that there's a lot of agency that women who date men in this neck of the woods have that they aren't aware that they have. And I think very often there might be gut decisions about settling down with someone who is near them, physically near them, or someone who has always been around them, but who might not necessarily be the right fit for them. So that's something that I think is worth considering. If you meet someone who is the right one for you, that's awesome. That's great. And if that's the case, they'll still be right there in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Okay, there's no reason to put it in law when you're 18, 19, right? Other than tax purposes, but what are we buying a house at 18, 19 in this economy? I think it's just worth thinking about. So that's my first little note. And the second one that I'll give is be very careful about whom and what you compare yourself to. Humans, as we've talked about on this show, are predisposed to make comparisons. We have these things, they're called comparison groups, and we compare ourselves to the people in those groups or to the groups. In 2021, a whistleblower leaked a bunch of papers from Facebook, and what they found is that Facebook was knowingly positioning young girls and teenage girls to see unrealistic depictions of beauty. And it was dramatically harming their self-esteem, their self-worth, and it was leading to things like depressive symptoms, anxiety, eating disorders, and the like. And I would say be really cognizant of that in online spaces and also in-person spaces. Very often we take up hobbies or begin exercising our passion in a way that distracts us from the fact that we're comparing ourselves to a group or groups that aren't necessarily the best for us. So we want to be really, really careful about over-relying on comparison groups. Just because one group of people is doing something one way, it doesn't necessarily mean we need to do things that way as well. I would be very cognizant of that, especially when it comes to life-altering decisions like, again, getting married, having children, getting a divorce. You want to be careful. You want to hedge your bet. You don't want to be too gung-ho about it. And within that vein, a friend of mine taught me a phrase a while ago, and the phrase is, don't borrow trouble. And that always stuck with me. What it means is everybody has problems. I've got problems. You've got problems. We've all got problems. Your problems are worth voicing. Your problems are worth dealing with. And it's also important not to take on the problems of other people just because you see that other people have problems. You can help friends, and that's a very nice thing to do. You can be there for others, and that's very considerate. But you want to be careful about not taking on too much responsibility. When you borrow too much trouble, you don't have time to attend to your own needs, right? This is why we want to make sure that we are in a good space before, again, doing something like getting married or having children, right? People who are anxious, depressed, people who are struggling might make the decision that having kids or getting married is a solution to their issues, when in reality, it often compounds the issues that they already have. So don't borrow that trouble. Work on yourself, have that agency, make decisions on your own. That's what I have to say to the women who date men. For the men who date women, I have a couple of other pieces of advice, and I'm going to give this advice partially from the literature and partially from my own perspective. Number one, do not weaponize your incompetence. This may be a term that you're unfamiliar with. Weaponized incompetence is a real sneaky tool, and it's something that can really harm relationships. I'll give you an example from me and my life. I am so bad at folding the laundry. I'm really bad at it. I can't do it. All my shirts have wrinkles. It's terrible. And in the past, when I've been in relationships, I've been asked to do the laundry. And I say, yeah, I'll do it. But I'm really bad at it. I'm sorry. I'm bad at doing the laundry. I'm bad at folding it. My fault. And then sure enough, I do a bad job. And then I don't get asked to do the laundry anymore. And I'm like, oh, great. I don't have to do the laundry anymore because I'm not being asked to do it anymore. But of course, that is simply me refusing to learn how to do the laundry. Same thing goes for any household chore. Grocery shopping, cooking, baking, cleaning, all those sorts of things. If you are a man in a relationship with a woman, especially in this area where we are a little bit more adherent to gender norms, the tendency can be to say, well, that's not my job in a relationship. It's not my job to learn to cook, to clean, to do laundry, to take care of the kids, things like that. And then you might, quote unquote, try and do it and fail. And you need to ask yourself, are we really trying and failing, or are we just weaponizing our incompetence? Are we doing a bad job on purpose, or are we being lazy so that we just won't be asked to do it in the future? That's piece of advice number one. Be careful, be cognizant of what you're doing there. Number two, and related, very important to remember this. If you're a man who dates women, your partner, your girlfriend, your wife, she's supposed to be a friend. She's supposed to be a companion. She's not supposed to be an employee. This is very important, especially for households with one source of income. If you are a man in a relationship with a woman and you earn the income, you got to remember that your wife, your girlfriend, your significant other is not your employee, okay? You are not meant to control how much money they are allowed to use simply because you are the one earning that money. If you are in a partnership with your significant other, it is worth remembering that this person is doing things for the relationship that you might not be aware of, especially if you have kids. If you go out and earn money during the day and your partner is at home with the kids, your partner has a full-time job, and they are entitled to compensation for that job. So I would be very careful about stepping into a relationship where you feel as though it is your responsibility to make this money and then choose where all that money goes. That's not what a partnership is. That is what a work relationship looks like. When you're doling out, delineating money, you're in control of the other person. And that's not what we want our relationships to be. You are supposed to enjoy spending time with your significant other. You're supposed to like your wife. And if you don't, if you view them as an employee, if you view them as an extension of yourself, well, you might want to be careful about why you're in this relationship in the first place. Last but not least, I will say target strength. Do not target vulnerability. And by this, I mean two important things. If you target someone to date because you view them as vulnerable or small or weak, you are setting up a power dynamic that can only harm your relationship. Instead, target strength. Target someone who is independent. Target someone with a plan. Target someone with ideas. Maybe those plans and ideas are, for example, to be a stay-at-home partner, a stay-at-home spouse, and that's fine. But have an agreement about what that looks like. Don't target someone who you think has low self-esteem because you feel like it'll be easy to control the family as a result. That's going to take effort. Because many of us are told, as men, that we are supposed to be in charge. And that's not necessarily the case. One way in which we can do this is we can go out of our way to make friends with women. Find platonic friends who are of the opposite sex, with no strings attached. Just be friends with women. Learn about what women like. Develop similar interests. Have a good time. Enjoy their presence. And then take their advice, especially as it pertains to dating. So, what I'm saying here is if you're a man who dates women, the worst thing that you can do for yourself is to try and use the relationship that you are pursuing as a source of control. If you feel like you need to control your partner, or you need to be in charge of your relationship, or if you feel like you don't really like women all that much or don't have anything in common with them, you might not be ready to date. You might be ready to fool around, but you might not be ready to be in a long-term committed relationship. And you're going to have to do work in order to get there. So, with my final few minutes, I will give some concluding thoughts. If you listen to what I said here, be you a woman, a man, a non-binary person, or someone else, if you're listening to what I'm saying here and saying to yourself, man, that just sounds like more work than I'm willing to put in, you have your answer. Relationships are hard. They require work. Close relationships require more work. The stakes are higher. There are, again, legally binding documents. There are human children who depend on your income and emotional stability to be raised correctly. If you don't want to put that work in, you don't have to. But if you don't want to put that work in, don't get into the relationship, don't have the kids. Relationships are very difficult, but they're also very rewarding. They need to be shown respect. You need to have respect for your significant other and for the relationship that you share with them. That includes respecting the children, if the children are there, respecting their autonomy, their independence, and facilitating those things too. Not just allowing them to be their own self, but encouraging it. If we want our relationships to be satisfying and rewarding, that's something we can really do. The next concluding thought that I'll give, and this was one that was very hard for me to accept, is that relational communication theory, all the theories we've talked about over the years, they can be a great way to understand how most relationships tend to work a lot of the time. But they're not necessarily a great way to solve the interpersonal conflicts that you face in your relationship. If you get into an argument with your significant other, I would advise against saying, well, relational uncertainty theory says that this is happening, so we should try this. Or, well, family communication patterns argue that what we're going through is this right now, so we should do that instead. That's not what people want to hear. People usually just want to hear something that is validating and respectful and kind and attentive. You can use communication theory, you can use theory on close relationships to make sense of what's going on, but I would not start implementing theory into my relationship. That's not really how it works. This knowledge can help us do better in our relationships, but it's not necessarily a free pass to get away with things. So be careful about how you use comm theory. And to that end, the very last thing I'll say is that very often people say things like, well, the secret to a successful relationship is communication. Communication is the key. And that's kind of true. I would consider it more like a key ring, a giant cartoonish ring with 50 different keys on it. Each key is best for a specific moment, a specific relationship, a specific interaction, and it's up to you to determine which key is the best key for that moment. That has always been the goal of this podcast, to help sort you through your toolkit, your ring of keys. I hope I've done that over the course of the last few years. And of course, if you want to learn more, you can go back and listen to our relationship podcast. It's been 75 episodes in 5-6 years. I've been happy to do it. So for now,
You've been listening to Red Rock Relationships, a podcast about communication. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time. If you'd like to be on the show or have questions for us, please send us an email to redrockrelationships@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just search Red Rock Relationships. Thank you again. And remember, it all begins with good communication. This has been a production from A Podcast Studio.